Hey everyone, what's up and welcome back to another episode of Dev Interrupted. I'm your host Dan Lyons, Linear B co-founder and COO, and today I'm joined by Peter McKee, Vice President of Developer Relations and Community at Sonar. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
We were joking before. I love that title. That must be a really fun job to
Yeah,
have, to be a VP of like developer relations. Like how is that for you?
it's great. It's great. I was a software engineer for 20 some years, 25 years or so. Really enjoyed it. I thought I was going to be the guy you put in the dark room, slid pizzas to, leave alone. And I was that in the early career, but as you can't tell, I turned out to be the smiley, talkative engineer. And when I was at Docker, they were like, this role might be good for you. And yeah, I love it. I love it. You get to talk about tech, stay involved in it, be hands-on, but I don't have any deadlines for production on the dev team. So, there's that. So yeah, I really enjoy it.
I think you thought you were going to live off of pizza, Mountain Dew, maybe some Reese's Pieces. I remember that's what I used to eat, a lot of Reese's Pieces when I was a developer.
Oh, I love Reese's. Yeah.
But you're the guy that can also talk, smile, be on a pod, relate to people. Who gave you your first shot at it? You said it was Docker?
Yep, it was Docker.
That's cool.
Yeah, we had sold off the enterprise business to a company called Morantis, and we kind of started over and recapitalized. I kind of lucked out, right? Because it was a huge community already. Docker had a massive brand. So it was able to kind of step into that brand. So yeah, it was a great first dev relation role, and I loved it. Yeah.
That's really great. Yeah, thanks for sharing your background a little bit. I know like some of the developers listening and stuff maybe like how do I get a shot at that? Like what do I need to do to be like Peter? But today we are going to continue. So my co-host Connor and I have been interviewing leaders from across the engineering spectrum. We have this series going on Gen AI, obviously like the hot topic, variety of viewpoints on different approaches with AI and what does it mean for developers. So it's been really fun so far to get everybody's perspective. So I guess we'll start out, Peter. Like, what's your perspective on how Gen AI is impacting software development processes? You can take it from whatever you want to take it from.
Yeah, man, it's a huge question, right? It's super interesting. So many ways that it's definitely impacting development, and I think it will just continuously impact us. Impact us might be a strong word, right? Because I also feel that let's think 5 years from now, 3 years, 5 years from now, the progression of how these LLMs and the Gen AI is progressing, the speed it's going, is crazy, right? And I don't think we know exactly what it's going to look like in 3 to 5 years. I was thinking about this the other day. I take a step back, right? And if you look at when I first started developing in the 90s, right, their assembly was still around, C was around. I walked uphill both ways to work, but these terrible days. But yeah, and then C++, right? But as we went, you abstract and you get higher and higher and higher. The barrier to entry becomes lower and lower and lower, right? And I think that's what Gen AI, I think if we look at it right now as a tool as such, right, that you're going to start programming at a higher level, right? Does English become the new programming language, right? If you think about it, we're writing English just in specific keywords, right, to give commands. Yep. It's not that big of a leap to go to, general English to then gets transformed into JavaScript like everything else and run in the browser. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
But it's very interesting. So it's affecting development. It's affecting the way we think, the way tools are being built. It's going to change not only us, but knowledge workers in general, right? There's a whole other thing too, right? We thought it was going to be the robots, the autonomous vehicles, right? But no, it's coming for the lawyers and the software engineers and the doctors, right? With triaging. It's pretty interesting. Very, very interesting.
So first of all, I do think it's affecting all industries, right? We're going to talk about software development, but I think you're right. Like everything's going to have its own co-pilot, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I'm a lawyer. I have my co-pilot to help me formulate. I don't know what lawyers do, but help me formulate like my disposition or whatever, right? But, I do think everyone's going to get paired up with some type of bot that helps them be more productive. And I think it's pretty fitting that it's starting with, developers, the ones that are creating these, bots anyways. Do you see anything like difference between, I don't know, like entry level developers versus more like, hey, I started developing in the 90s versus I'm coming out of school now, or like I, am in my first
Right.
few years. Like, are you seeing anything differences with that?
Yeah, definitely, definitely, right? Yeah, someone with 30 years experience, 20 years, 15 years experience, right? So let me take a step back, and I kind of think of things through this kind of a model. When I was thinking about this, is so I have 7 children. We homeschooled them all. My wife, really, I acted like the principal, right? But there's there's this classical education model called the trivium, right? And you start out with your language and grammar. It's your basics, right? Then you learn logic, and it's traditional logic, but it's a logic in how do solutions work? How do solutions work logically to solve a problem? And then above that is rhetoric, where you start to argument for different problems to solve, right? And so if you think of that through engineering, entry level, mid level, junior, even senior folks could stay in that logical phase. Principals and staff go up into that rhetoric, right? They're working across the organization. And so if I apply that to generative AI, those junior developers, right? They really just know the mechanics, right, of writing software. They can't argue at the rhetoric level, right? And I think to really use Gen AI where it is now, as powerful and as quickly, you have to understand your language really well, your environments really well. You have to be able to see what Gen AI produces and know how to shape that into what your domain space and the way you construct software. Junior developers don't do that as easy, right? And so have we accelerated the copy and paste from Stack Overflow with Gen AI? Kind of just sped it up, right? And so I think that's the real risk, is for you still at this point have to understand what the code is doing, how it does it, but you can offload things, right? Like I can never remember how to read in a file and parse a CSV file, right? Like Stack Overflow is gold for me for that, right? And Gen AI, boom, 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 can do it 2 seconds, and I can read the code very well and make sure it's solid. So I think senior level folks, and I'm just put into 2 big buckets, right? They're able to reason quickly about the Gen AI, that's the code that's been produced. And it's just experience, right? It's just wisdom, let's say. It's not knowledge, it's wisdom, right? So it's the more wisdom you have, you're able to see the shit code first, quicker, right? And then the gold code. So I think those are the 2 big buckets I kind of think about it, and how you should kind of, maybe as a dev manager, thinking about these tools.
That's interesting. So I think you gave the example of like parsing a file or something like that. Now, if you have the wisdom, you're a developer, you've been around a while, you have some wisdom, you would say like, hey, for parsing a file, like that's not where I want to spend my brain power. Let me, I'll review the code. I'll make sure that it's quality, but it's like, that's not what I'm really trying. Usually that's not what I'm not like writing this parser. It's like, that's like a means to the end of the actual business value that I'm trying to achieve. Now, maybe there's some danger there then, because if a junior developer is using Copilot, this is just speculation. And before, at least I had to go to the internet, search like Overflow, like do some copy paste, maybe read what people are saying, like, hey, this is a good solution, not a good solution. Like I remember doing all this, trying to find.
Yep.
I don't know if it's just like auto-populating for me. Maybe I'm not going to, maybe the quality will go down, or maybe there is a little bit more risk. Do you think there is more risk for junior developers? Like,
yeah, 100%. And that's what we worry about at Sonar, right? We're really worried about quality. And we do static code analysis, right? And for us, Gen AI now is our big message is, hey, this is even more so why you should be scanning your code and looking for quality, right? Right. There's just tons more code being produced. And what I've learned working at Sonar, right? There's security risks that are very, very hard to spot in your code, right? There's things in greps and in regular expressions, and right. And it looks good, but the machine is way better to do it, right? So yeah, I think there's a big risk. There's always a risk to go faster. Gen AI is producing more code. Hey, let's use that. It works, right? Functionality and quality are 2 different things, right? You can have something functioning, but it could be of shit quality, excuse my language, right? It could be poor quality. What's the 3 pigs and the wolf, right? How they build their houses on sticks and brick, right? And sure, the doors all worked, right? They had windows in all the houses, but the one that was built on a solid foundation last. And that's, sorry, using a kid's story, but it's true, right? Build on quality, and static analyze your code for quality first, especially if you're using Gen AI, right? You just cannot ensure the quality that's being produced. That's not what it does. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you there. Our like my co-founding partner, his name is Ori, and what he's saying, he's our CEO at Linear B. What we're observing is the amount of code that is being developed. Now, it might be developed by a human, but it's actually also developed by like some type of AI. The volume of code is increasing. So there's a lot more
Yeah.
code. Now that, I know you're at Sonar, so that's going to put a lot of stress on tools like Sonar. You need more usage, right? I open up a PR.
Yeah.
What's the quality of that? What needs to be reviewed? Is there a vulnerability here? And I also think that
Right.
there is pressure on engineers to move faster. Like, I'm
Yeah.
talking with a lot of VPs of engineering. They're coming to Linear B, like our company, and they want to measure the impact of generative AI, right? I'm
Right.
spending millions of bucks on this. Are my juniors faster? Like, what's the impact of it?
Right.
And so I do think
Yeah.
there is that. It's maybe like double dangerous because there's that expectation. Like, you got to move. You got to move faster. I just bought this thing for you.
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Yeah, it just compounds it, right? Most business leaders, and probably yourself, right? You think of ROI, right? ROI
they
is a,
got to, and
if
that's like
right,
what they're judged on, right?
exactly. And coupled with that, right, is how hard is it to, first of all, quantify how good a dev team is, right? It's so hard. Right? You can't look at numbers of lines of code. You can't, maybe it's solid features that the business wants delivered, right? Something like that, right? But it's not lines of code. It's not, issues fixed, right? Because what will happen if we go with those? We'll become sales folks, right? Sorry, sales folks, and we'll game them, right? Sure, you performance me on number of defects I fix or number of issues features I develop. Even, well, grabbing the smallest features I can, the easiest ones to do, right? And or I'm going to produce a bunch of defects and then I fix them and look like a hero,
Mm-hmm.
right? So even that's an issue, right? And now throwing more code into the mix and saying go faster, faster, faster. Yeah, I mean, so in some sense, we do need these abstractions so we can go quicker and still bring more value to companies, but at what cost,
It's
right?
usually always like in software engineering, it's like the balance, right? You want to go
Yeah,
fast, but you got to have the quality. You want to get out to production as fast as possible, but if there's a bug found in production, it costs you like 10x more, so you don't want that. And I think that's
exactly,
kind of what
exactly.
everyone's dealing with. Then you got the security issues on top of it. Yeah, really interesting times. Have you seen anything around coaching developers around using some of these generative tools? Like, is any organization trying to say kind of like, okay, like here's how to use them if you're a junior? What, even just like what we said in this pod, like, have you seen any coaching stuff going
Yeah,
on?
I haven't. We do some clean as you code or learn as you code, but it's a real more around vulnerabilities, around issues, why it's an issue and why you shouldn't code like that. And that's really good for junior developers. But no, I've seen other companies and YouTube, coming out for the general public around prompt engineering. I'm sure you've seen, which is powerful, but nothing specific for developers, right? At least that I've seen.
Yeah.
No, like how do you like truly integrate these in? What does that workflow look like? What does that pipeline look like? Yeah, it's very, very interesting. I don't know. Does that plug into some kind of these DevX platforms that are coming out, right? These,
It certainly does. Like, for us, we'll say, hey, this code had some, or this pull request had like Gen AI modified code in it. Or Sonar, hey, found something on the PR scan, set up a rule for like multiple reviewers. Like, we're doing that type of stuff with
right.
companies. That's kind of like putting
Yep.
policy and I would say like rails around it, which I think it is
Right.
really needed. And then the other thing that we're kind of like exploring a bit is like how could we coach engineers like earlier on so you don't have to get to that point that you need all the rules. But yeah, I haven't seen anyone doing that yet.
One thing that popped in my head, I don't know if it's germane to the conversation, but we've been thinking about, just like everything, right? It's junk in, junk out, right? And so I think part of the problems that I'm not sure, right, is some of these LLMs or Gen AI is it's matching a pattern that's probably not the best pattern for that solution, right? And it's a little bit of randomness in there gets a little bit off. If Sonar is at the front, right, and you're scanning and cleaning the code that then you're feeding into your LLMs, or at least I forget the term, but you have your LLM and then you're putting your data into it also, right? If that code is clean, I think that's a great start, right? You should be starting there to then feed into your LLM some good quality, and it could be specific to your organization how you do, remote procedure calls, right? Like, you can do them a handful of different ways, but we do it here at Visa this way, right? And maybe LLMs could then be powerful to help that way, right? To help say, I'm going to generate you code, but I know the pattern that you use, and so you get maybe a higher quality. Still not kind of in the training, but that's one thing that we're kind of thinking about at Sonar that would help with some of this, right? With junior developers, that they can start trusting the answers a little bit better, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Have you seen anything around Gen AI affecting quality? Like, is there any data reports or anything that you've seen?
I've written a couple articles pointing to GitHub, Microsoft,
Yeah.
and the like that are the amount of code churn that's
Yep.
happening,
Increasing.
the amount of
Yep.
yeah
We see that
increasing
too.
ton.
Yep.
Yeah, the quality is definitely down, right? Developer love, right? Developer joy is dropping, right?
Oh,
Because you
interesting.
are, you know what it is like. As an engineer, you want to work on the code that you wrote that's nice and formatted, nice and neat. You can understand it right away, and you can
Yeah,
add
like
to it,
the
right?
art of it.
Yeah, but it's rare, right? You get into a code base that's been built 15 years ago. They're so bound together, right? And you work a lot on fixing other people's code, right? And now if the code's being generated faster, it's Gen AI, it's not that great of code. Now you got to fix even more code, right? So developers getting upset with that, and they're looking for, and it's still a little bit of a seller's market, right? Like we can move. Top engineers still have a lot of leeway to move. So if you go somewhere and you're like, this code base is terrible, I'm not getting the help to fix it, I'm going to leave, right? And so we're seeing developer churn, leaving places to find that holy grail of development
That's one
shop,
of the
right?
good things
Which
about being a developer. It's like you can get the job. Usually, you can always get a
yeah,
job, right? So that's like a good
yeah,
thing for like the VPs and the managers listening. I mean, I think most people know it's like that's why
yeah,
developer experience matters so much. That's why companies like us are measuring it. That's why companies I think like you are saying like let's keep the quality high. Nobody wants like a crappy code base, like that sucks. I mean,
yeah. It's
developers can
terrible to work.
go wherever they want. But the fact is, like most of the VPs that I'm talking to are experimenting with Copilot, right? Like they are rolling
Yeah,
out initiatives, they're testing it, they want to measure the impact. Like it's here, it's real.
yeah. I think you have to.
Gotta,
Yeah.
yeah. You don't want to be left behind. Now we were talking about the junior developers a little bit, but probably on the flip side of that, maybe if you're like intermediate, I think you were saying like senior developers, the ones before principal, maybe we have been seeing increased throughput for sure.
I mean, I take notes, right, to manage, and every day I have my Sublime, and I do Markdown in there, right? And I have some little goofy Markdown for tasks. And I would go day to day. I'd go across each one of those files, and I pull the tasks up, and I put them into another file. Don't ask why; it's just a weird process. But I'm like, well, I'm an engineer. I should write a script to do this, right? And so I'm like, I'm going to write it in C. Why? Because I haven't written C in a while. Threw that out very quickly because there's no strings, but I went back to JavaScript. Okay. So I jump over to Chat GPT, and I was using, I think, 3.5, maybe even before this,
Mm-hmm.
3.5, right? And just started firing up, asking questions. And I hesitate to say 80%. It's probably more like 65, 70-ish percent get me there. It would start to break down as I started getting into the little bit of refactoring places. It would break down. It would add modules that weren't compatible with other modules. But my point is, I'm almost 30 years into software engineering, heavily in the JavaScript since like
Mm-hmm.
2003. So I know it really, really well, right? It didn't matter to me, right? I was able to take that last 40, 30, 20% and code it really easily. So it was very powerful for me. It helped tremendously, right? Because I knew I could see what it was doing. I knew what it was doing. I could fix the versions real quick. I could refactor really quick. Yeah, you shouldn't really use that method, right? This is a cleaner way to do that.
But you can clean up. It's like the 80-20 rule or like the 60-40. It's like you could do the 40-20 30. At the end of the day, what you're saying is you're moving faster, which means more code is going to get pushed at a faster rate in
Mm-hmm.
general, let's say. Do you have
Yep.
any opinions on, like, if we're in agreement that more code in general is going to be pushed faster throughout the planet, right? Do you have any thoughts on processes or like infrastructure to accommodate this load in a sense? Like, have you thought about that at all?
other than AI monitoring AI,
I mean that
right?
that is a thing. Like we're working with
Yeah,
some customers where they they are so let's say Copilot has like assisted the developer in creating some of the code. They open up a pull request, and on the linear B side we can see that it's like assisted with Copilot. So then
right,
also what they're doing is experimenting with some of the AI review, right?
right.
What we see them doing is then writing some rules, some automation to say, okay, if there is this much code that's like Gen AI like orchestrated, or if we have like a reviewer that's like an AI bot, I do want to still make sure there's a human or two. Like I see a lot of
Right.
that happening. Again, that's kind of like streamlining. I would call it like end to end more on the SDLC because the
Yeah,
load is
definitely.
moving to that PR basically.
Yeah, I think, AI is really good at pattern matching, right? And predicting. And, we might not use these large LLMs maybe for code reviews, right? Maybe those are specialized tools that are really tweaked and there's thresholds there. But yeah, I think that's where we're going to go. I think to answer what you should do now, and I'm extremely biased, right? So I'll talk in terms of the solution and not so much
Yeah.
Sonar, but Sonar has a great product, right? But static analyze your code. Should be static analyzing your code. AI, I think will eventually get there. Will help augment static analysis, but um, right now, handwritten parsers, static analyzers, these are written by PhD student, not even students, graduates, doctors, right? Really, really good. So I think quality first, right? You've got to be checking your quality,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's the barrier to entry, right? It's kind of like we need to get there. I think how we are with unit testing and functional testing, right? Like no good software engineering team, professional software engineering team, DevOps team will not allow their code without any unit
Mm-hmm.
tests, right? And that, like, you just would not do that, right? And we don't do that with quality, right? Why aren't we doing that with quality, right? We should be doing that with quality. I think DevOps personnel should be going, great. Your unit tests don't turn green, you're not going. If your quality gate isn't passed, it's not going,
Yep.
right? Right. I think we need to get there, and I think that'll help with Gen AI with all this code produced. And then how do we look at AI just in general? How can it help streamline the processes? How can it help with code reviews? To your point, how can it help take a junior developer to a senior developer faster? Right. I think there's a huge power there, right? And you were hinting at it and talking about it earlier. I think that's maybe you and I should start a second company and do that. But right, right. But I
Cut
think
the time in half from junior developer to senior developer with our new AI software.
right. But I think that's
It's
very
honestly a compelling thing.
yeah,
Like again, ever like
yeah,
the people that are putting up millions of dollars in budget. So it's like your VPEs, your CTOs. They report to the CEO. They are on the hook to show this investment moved our projects along faster, gave more ROI to the business. So it's actually not even that much of a joke. Like I bet they'd like go for it, you know?
yeah, yeah, 100%. This might be contrarian. I know we're talking to the developer tech crowd, maybe, right? Businesses look at us as a liability, right? We're a cost center usually. We're a risk to put security into production, right? Right. Code is a risk, right? And the more you have, it's harder to maintain. And technical debt gets harder, becomes more expensive. Software engineers are expensive, right? So whatever we could do to lower that risk for the business is what I think an engineering and development team should look to do, right? Because then that brings even more value to the business, and they love you and they keep paying you to do what you do. So I think a lot of tools are going to focus on that. How do we, and we can't as engineers get too tight, right? And hold on to our domain too much. Like I have to write code. That's what I do. And we do so much more than just typing in code, right? But you got to let some of that go, right? It's just a step up in the abstractions, right? We're just moving up higher. I would never come to you and Dan and say, "Hey, you're going to go the next at Linear B, you should absolutely go to assembly language. It's the future." Right? Like we never it's always higher and higher and higher. So, you can't beat them. You got to join the robots. So I think we all just accept it, but you know, think about it deeply to how we bring these tools in and how we protect our code bases, right? We can't let them become more of a liability, right? By just going faster and putting code into it, right? It's not a good
Yeah.
idea.
Couldn't agree with you more. One of the things I wanted to ask you is there's certainly different types of defects that I think, so I'm not an expert in Sonar, but I do know there's different types of defects, different types of severities. Let's say some of the defects are security incidents, but other ones might just be bugs. Like it's not a security thing, it is a bug. Is there any data around like teams that are using like Copilot or another Gen AI solution, like the type of issues that are surfaced more than other types? Like, is it security stuff or is it like little tight, like smaller stuff? Is there anything around that yet?
You know what? I'm not sure. I haven't seen anything.
That
That's a
would be
great,
cool
that's
to
a
see.
great,
Yeah.
yeah. It's definitely affecting it, but what is the effect, right? Because I could probably infer from what you're saying, right? Like if it's all security, we've got a major issue. If it's you're just missing your tabs, right, and formatting, then
Yeah.
okay, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there's a
There's a great
wide range of like like the
yeah.
severity, right? I'm thinking like if I'm a engineering manager or a VPE or a CTO listening to this, and I know I need to start either dabbling in some Copilot stuff, or I maybe started to put a little bit of money in, but now I'm listening to this and saying, oh, I don't know. Like, I don't want anyone to be afraid. I think everyone actually should go and do this. But
Yeah.
is there anything around like the safe way to roll this out or to start experimenting so that you're not just like throwing all of your developers into a situation that could get the company into trouble a bit? You know what I mean?
I think you need to look at your policies and your data retention. Like start there, make sure that's all in place, right? Make sure you're not leaking any IP or unintentionally bringing IP in that you don't want to. I think that's an issue too, right? It's a little hard to tell, no, but get all that, cross your T's and dot your I's. And then next, I think, like anything, right? Start a POC, start
Yep.
small, start on maybe a line of business application, right? That's maybe not public facing. If you're at a large organization, probably start in, customer success. They might have some ticketing, something homegrown, like start there, right? Start a small project. And I think be intentional about it, right? Um, and I don't think it's smart just okay. Let's open it up to these 5,000 developers at Visa or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, start small, do a little POC, build off of that. And it because we're so early, I don't think the learnings are there yet to be able to give really really good concrete prescriptive advice. Right.
Yeah.
I think companies are going to have to learn some of that as they go. Right. What are the problems? What does how does upping the amount of code and the speed that we're trying to move at, how is that affecting things? Is it working? Is it not working? Is there certain types of code? Is it backend that does better with Gen AI right now, as opposed to React or Angular that's might be a little framework based and less language based, right? Yeah, I don't have anything very prescriptive other than I would think start as a normal engineer, start small, build upon that, go slow, walk, crawl, run. And as an engineer, I think you need to fight back that with the business, right? The business you still need to push. I think you need to push, right? But I think you walk through it slowly.
It's good advice, and I think like between us we can get to maybe some, because I mean I think you're thinking about it the right way. It's like the first piece of advice is like use your engineering instinct. Okay, what do I do with my engineering instincts? I start small, so like with a control, like what I know is what other
Yeah.
VPs of engineering are doing. So first of all, they are starting with a few groups of engineers, not
Right.
rolling it out to everybody. So that's one thing. And they're measuring. So the
Yeah.
idea is if I start with like group A and I give everyone licenses, make sure you have a measurement in place that you can measure your bug rate, your change failure rate, your cycle time, like so your PR size, so you
Yeah.
can do this comparison. And I'm sure like on the sonar side, like you can see like more hits or less hits or even or whatever
Yep.
it is. So now you have some data in place. Like that's one tip, and that's basically what you're saying. And I do see VPs doing that. But I think the other thing that you and I talked about now, what groups are you going to pick? Is it a front end group? Is it a more junior like you have geography,
Right.
you have skill level, you have area of code, right?
Yeah. It's interesting, right?
Like so
Yeah.
that can be, I think that's pretty good advice to say like intentionally pick like who is going to try it, right?
Yeah. Who would Gen I benefit the most?
Right.
It's a hard question, right? Because I could see saying, let's take a more junior team and let's see if we could up level them, right, through Gen AI and some of these tools. Or do you go the other way? Let's take a more senior team and see how much our top performing senior teams, see how much that can,
Yeah. I'm not sure.
maybe you do
Yeah,
both.
I'm not sure it even almost matters. It's more about like the intention of the experiment. It's like, hey, I have like a theory. I'm going to measure this that I do feel like it can really. I have a lot of juniors. I have a really junior team. I feel like it can help them. Okay. So deploy it
Yeah.
there and then measure it against the average. Or hey, you know what? I really think like my intermediate and seniors are going to crush on this because they have the wisdom. They're going to use it the right way. I'm going to hold off the juniors. I think it's
Right.
more like the intentionality of the experiment is what I'm seeing. These, I think the VPs that are a little more progressive that are pushing forward with it.
Yeah.
Before like dropping the millions of dollars on like the 1,000 devs that you have.
No, I love that. I love that. And, as a VP, right, as an executive at a company, your main goal is to drive massive change, right? Make a change in the organization, right? They're looking to make big changes, right? And that's where the VP stands and what they're thinking about and where they're looking to do, right? And so then having that team, that strong technical SMEs underneath them that can temper it is very important. But yeah, I think you need to do those experiments. And I think what you laid out,
Yep.
I think you're right. It doesn't really matter, but to your point, right? Like you're saying, intentional.
Yep. That's what I see like the most like progressive VPs are doing that I'm working with. So I'm just gonna throw that advice to everyone. And then on the ROI side, you're totally right. It's like, yeah, you do have to show the ROI at the end of the day. But if you go to your CEO and say like, this is the intention of my AI like program or like Copilot experiment, I will report and update you on it. And when I feel like we're in a good spot, then I'm gonna ask you for all the money. I won't do it so then it's like it's
Right.
controlled, I guess, in a sense. Is there any topic, Peter, that we needed to hit on that we didn't hit on?
No, I think this is a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. We hit a lot of stuff. I think quality, of course, I'm gonna be preaching quality always, right? I think it's very, very important. Yeah, use our open source tools, right? They're free. Get a hint, use them as a tool, and then you'll see if they work for you. Go forward with it. I think that's I think you need to be doing that in tandem in a professional setting where you use Gen AI.
Yep.
It's your safety net a little bit, right? It's the when you do flipping above on the trapeze, right? Something's going to catch you. So I think that was the one thing I really wanted to talk about, and then I just wanted to see where this Gen AI went, and super interesting. So thanks for having me. I
Yeah,
really, really
really
appreciate it.
appreciate you coming on. I'd love to have you on again. And the next time that you come on, maybe it'll be enough time that we can even get some data on like the types of findings with on the quality.
Yeah,
I think that, I mean, we're all learning like what the impact is. So that
yeah,
would be really cool. But yeah, Peter, thank you so much for coming on the pod today. It's been a pleasure.
yeah. Thank you, likewise, and have me back. I'd love to be back. Yeah.
Awesome. And for you listeners, please subscribe to our Dev Interrupted YouTube channel to watch this episode and tons of other behind the scenes content. See you all soon. And Peter, again, thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.